Hello. Today we're going to go to page 67 and 68 of our interactive notebook, and we are going to be using algebra to solve percent problems. Just like we solved percent problems yesterday with proportions, we're going to be doing the same thing, but this time we're going to be using the algebraic process and equations. You have a small third sheet paper. It's going to be going on page 68. You need to make sure that you've left room for your essential question. Let's begin. To start off, your essential question is going to be, well, first the topic is solving percent problems using equations. And once again, this goes on page 68. Your essential question, how can I use an equation to find the percent of a number? How can I use an equation to find the percent of a number? Now let's look to our directions below in the printout. It says, when you are solving percent problems with equations, the way the problem is worded will give you clues as to how to set up the equation. Look at the examples below to see how you can translate words into mathematical equations. And I'm going to box that because it's really the key to this is we're going to translate because we know that math is its own language. Certain words in math mean constant things no matter what type of problem they're put into. And so we're going to look for those words, and that's going to tell us what we're going to do numerically. Okay, so some keywords that we're going to look for, and I'm going to write them, actually go below, is we're going to look any form of what, and what number, what percent, anything like that is going to represent the variable. We don't know, it's a what, it's unsure, so we're going to put it as a variable like n. And then we also know that the word is going to represent equals. And then we also have the word of. And when we see the word of, we know that it means to multiply that. So those are kind of our glossary of terms as we're looking at problems. Okay, so let's go back up here and see if we can find any of those words in our examples above. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So there we go. And I already drew some arrows in. We're going to fill in some of this a little bit more even. So the first thing we see is the phrase, what number? And if you remember below, I told you that when we see what something, that's going to represent something we don't know. It's an unknown, and we're going to call that our variable. And we're going to represent that with a letter, and in this case, the letter N. And then we have is. Now remember, when we see is, we are looking at the word that translates to the equal sign. I'm going to skip the percent, and I'm going to go to the word of. When we see the word of, we know that that translates to the multiplication symbol. So now we have a variable, an equal sign, a spot, a multiply, and another number. So now it's just a matter of dropping some of these numbers down. Now when we have our number here, we're going to leave that number just the way it is. We're just going to drop it straight down and just write it at the bottom. But now we're left with this percentage. And this is where we remember our process of converting. And we're going to convert percentages to decimals or fractions. Okay? So in this case, we actually converted it. You'll see they moved the decimal place 2 times to the left, and we made it into a decimal. So now we have n equals 20 hundredths times 30, which really looks like this. Which, if you remember, we know how to multiply decimals. We multiply normally, so 0, 0, 0, 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 3 is 6. We add, we count how many decimal places out, 1, 2, there's 2 spaces, count it in, 1, 2, put our decimal place in, and we're left with the number 6. So n equals 6. Another way to say this is, let's look back up here at the beginning where we have what number? Well, our n, which is our what number, is 6, is 20% of 30. 6 is 20% of 30. Well, from what we know of, 10% would be 3. So wouldn't it make sense that 20% would be 6? Okay, so now pause if you need to and go back. Otherwise, we're going to move to the other side. And we're going to see a problem that's set up slightly different, but the words are going to stay the same. First one we see is we see the word is. Remember, is, we know, means equals. And then we have what percent. What percent? Remember I told you if we see what, we don't know it, it's an unknown, and it's going to be represented by variable. Of, that's a multiplying word, put our multiplication symbol in. So now we just need to fill in our numbers. Well, this is just a number, so we can just drop that down. 6, drop it down, 6. And now we have 80. Like I said, we can convert this either to, that's 30. It's not a percent. We're trying to figure out the percent. So because it's not a percent, we don't convert it, actually. So we're just going to drop that number down again. So unless it's a percent, we just drop the number straight down. Okay, so we have 6 equals n times 30. Algebraically speaking, we have to get the variable isolated. And by isolated, I mean alone. We want to get the n, or the variable, by itself. Because right now it's connected to this times 30, and we actually want to get it away from that times 30 so that it is by itself. And we do that by doing the opposite operation, the inverse operation. And the opposite of multiplying by 30, n times 30, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So instead of multiplying by 30, we divide by 30. And whatever you do on this side of the equal sign, algebraically we know the rule is you have to do on this side. So if I divide this side by 30, I have to divide this side by 30. Well, n times 30 divided by 30 actually ends up crossing itself out. So you're left over with just n. N is by itself. And we end up on this side with 6 over 30, which would be 6 divided by 30, which 30 can't go into 6. So we have to add a decimal place and a 0. But 30 can go into 60 2 times. So we end up with n equals 0.2, 2/10. And if we take 2/10 and we convert that to a percentage, we go once, twice, and we end up with 20%. So it equals 20%. And looking back at our equation up here, 6 is 20% of 30. Okay, so now let's just review. Anytime we see what number or what percent, we're talking about a variable. And it's going to be represented by a letter such as N, T, R, V, anything like that. When we see the word is, we're talking about equal or it equals. When we see of, we're talking about that it refers to multiply or times. It means those things. We know that the process that we're going to do is we are going to start off by translating the words we know to mathematical symbols to create an equation oh, excuse me, I'm off the paper. Let me make that a little bit bigger so you can see it better, hopefully. All right. Next, after we've done that, we are going to fill in numbers, but we're going to remember to convert percentages to decimals, or we could even use fractions, and I'll show you one of those in a minute. And then finally we will solve for the variable. And that's the 3 steps. Okay, so now I'm going to actually take us over to page 67. At this point, if you need to pause and go back to copy any of these notes down, go ahead and feel free to do so. Otherwise, please join us over on page 67. And on page 67, I'm going to write the question, what number is 68% of 60? So let's start off by first looking at the words that we know, because step number 1 was translating the words we know to mathematical symbols to create an equation. When I see what number, I know that refers to the variable, and I'm going to call it x. I know that is refers to the equal sign, and I know that of refers to multiplying. Step number 2 was for us to fill in the numbers to remember to convert the percentages to decimals or fractions. So here is 68%. In order to convert that to a decimal, because it can't be a percent anymore, I'm going to move my percentage sign 2 places to the left and make it into a decimal place. So I end up with 68 hundredths, because I moved it twice like that. And then the 60 is not a percent, it's already a number, so I'm just going to drop that guy down. Okay, so now I have the equation x equals 68 hundredths times 60. So my next step, because my variable is already isolated, it's by itself, my next step is actually to do the math. So I'm going to do 60 times 68 hundredths. 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 6 is 48. Placeholder. 0 times 6 is 0. 6 times 6 is 36. I'm going to add 0, 8, 0, carry the 1, 4. Now I'm going to count. I have 1 decimal place and 2. There's 2. Count it back in. 1, 2. So I end up with x equals 40 and 80 hundredths, or 40 and 8 hundredths. Either would be the same. So I know that 40 and 8 tenths, or 40 and 80 hundredths, is 68% of 60. That is my answer. Now, I told you earlier that we could also solve this type of problem in a second way, and that second way is by using a fraction. So I'm going to scoot this up, and I'm going to give you another question. And this one is, what number is 20% of 55? Now, sometimes we use fractions because it's simpler and it makes more sense with that particular number. It just kind of depends which one works the best. First thing we have to do, no matter what though, is we have to translate the words we know. We have a what number, that is going to be our variable. I'm going to call it n this time. Is, I bet you know what that means, equals. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to go to of. Of is our multiplication sign. So now we're going to put in our numbers, making sure to convert the percentage. I'm going to just drop this 55 down because it is staying the same. And I'm going to focus on this 20. Now, remember when I convert a fraction to a, when I convert a percentage to a fraction, I would put my fraction or my percentage over 100 per 100, 20%. But I need to simplify that, and I could divide both the top and the bottom by 20, and 20 divided by 20 is 1, and 100 divided by 20 is going to be 5. So now I'm going to simplify it, put my simplified fraction in here, 1/5. So now I have n equals 1/5 times 55. Now to make this simpler, can I make 55 into a fraction? I can. N equals 1/5 times 55 over 1. Remember, anytime we put a 1 underneath a number, it becomes a fraction that represents the original number. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to cross cancel, and I'm going to pull 5 out. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 55 divided by 5 is 11. So now let's multiply straight across. 1 times 11 is 11. 1 times 1 is 1. N equals 11 over 1. But I can simplify that even more and do n equals 11. So then my answer is, what number? 11. 11 is 20% of 55. And there is your answer and how you find the percent of a number or the percent of a quantity using the algebra or the algebraic method. Remember to pause your computer, go back as you need. It will get easier as you go through, and remember that you have a little freedom. Unless I tell you otherwise, you can use the proportion method that we did yesterday, or you can use this method, the algebraic method. And when you use the algebraic method, you can choose if you want to convert that percentage to a decimal or if you want to convert it to a fraction. It's really up to you. I hope you understand. I hope you have a great day, and talk to you soon. Bye.